Welcome to the 6th episode of the MFRR in Focus news webinar. This month, we have brought together an interview and panel discussion focusing on press and media freedom violations taking place during coverage of demonstrations. The title of our episode is Here to Report, the same as the ongoing campaign we have been leading as the MFRR, which was also the title of a session during the MFRR Summit 2022 that took place in March 2022. At demonstrations, journalists function as the general public's eye, keeping society informed about ongoing developments. While covering these demonstrations, journalists have been subjected to 214 violations between May 2021 and April 2022. 115 of these violations were physical assaults, while 73 were harassment and 50 were attacks to their property. A big majority of these attacks, 153, originated from private individuals, and 57 were a result of police intervention during these demonstrations. In this episode of MFRR in Focus, we welcome you to join us for an interview conducted by OBCT's Paola Rosá during our fact-finding mission in Italy in April. The interviewee is GVPress's journalist Cristina Pantaleoni, and this interview is going to be followed by a panel discussion moderated by ECPMF's Senior Advocacy Officer, Lawrence Hueting, joined by the Secretary General of the Independent Journalists Association of Serbia, Tamara Filipovic, and the Manager for Region Berlin and Brandenburg of the German Union, ver.di, Jörg Reichel.
Streets have become a dangerous location for journalists all over Europe. In Italy, the polarization increased the lack of trust in journalism, and the highly severe restrictions implemented by the government did not help easing the climate. Demonstrations against what was in fact a mandatory vaccination to access venues, restaurants, work and public transport became the scenery of frequent attacks on journalists. The Italian group of freelance video makers, GVPress, is fully aware of the difficulties.
Cristina Pantaleoni, GVPress, organization of freelance journalists, video makers. What are the difficulties of being freelance and video makers, first of all?
La difficoltà principale è il riconoscimento, quindi far capire alle persone chi siamo. Seconda difficoltà è avere un riconoscimento economico della nostra professione, quindi un'indennità di strada, un'assicurazione che serve anche perché siamo giornalisti in prima linea, cioè siamo davanti alla telecamera, con la telecamera in piazza, davanti a quello che succede. Possono essere scontri, per fare gli scontri bisogna avvicinarsi, bisogna riprendere vicinissimo quello che succede, altrimenti non si capisce. Per intervistare le persone bisogna avvicinarsi e molto spesso questo avvicinarsi ci mette a rischio la nostra persona. È successo al nostro collega di dover intervistare dei Novax chiedendo loro semplicemente perché manifestavano. Si è preso un cazzotto in faccia, fortissimo, deviazione nel setto nasale e zigomo rotto. E naturalmente è dovuto stare a casa. Stare a casa cosa significa per un freelance? Non percepire un guadagno.
This violence has been a phenomenon covering all Europe, not only Italy, and especially during the pandemics and the protests. But it is not new, because difficulties in the streets have always been on the agenda for journalists. What are the impacts on one side and what could be the solutions?
Parliamo sempre di Novax perché questa è la realtà degli ultimi 2 anni, però è successo anche a me di essere minacciata con una panca da attivisti politici, semplicemente perché appartenevo a un giornale che era della parte opposta, mi è stato chiesto per chi lavori, lavori per questo, ti tiro la panca. Quali sono le conseguenze psicologiche enormi? Perché hai paura, però senti di dover raccontare. E purtroppo c'è questa cosa kamikaze che è la telecamera, che ti mette un filtro tra te e la persona e ti spinge ad andare sempre più avanti, perché è come se non percepissi il pericolo. Però il pericolo c'è. ed è giusto che si faccia qualcosa per proteggere i clienti in linea. Chiunque possa inasprire le pene per le violenze contro i giornalisti che possono essere verbali o fisiche, che sono simili. La violenza può essere verbale sui social, quindi non può essere costretti a chiudere il proprio profilo social semplicemente perché si esprime un'opinione, o anche come faccio io per esempio, io nel mio profilo social non esprimo pareri. Perché? Perché credo che un giornalista sui social meno scrive meglio è, e poi perché non voglio che il mio lavoro sia condizionato da un commento o un altro commento. Il mio lavoro lo faccio per strada, lo faccio attraverso quello che produco, e in più le violenze fisiche ti comportano tante cose, che anche ripercussioni psicologiche minori. Questo mio collega ha avuto paura a uscire di casa per 3 settimane, a fare manifestazioni, a ritornare davanti a un Novax, perché c'è l'imprevisto, e sull'imprevisto non lo puoi calcolare.
What can we ask to the police who are in charge of the situation on the street?
Molto spesso le forze dell'ordine proteggono i giornalisti, nel senso consigliano di non avvicinarsi o consigliano di non parlare con determinate persone perché non è sicuro, però vediamo da un altro punto di vista. Perché non mi devo avvicinare se è una manifestazione di piazza ed è giusto raccontarla? Esiste il diritto di cronaca. Perché non lo devo fare? Perché è pericoloso? Perché non posso parlare con quella persona? Proteggete i giornalisti che fanno il lavoro, non impedite di farlo, e sanzionate pesantemente chi compie un atto contro un giornalista che sta svolgendo il suo lavoro. Non è lì per manifestare, sta semplicemente svolgendo il suo lavoro.
Welcome to this panel on reporting on protest as part of the Media Freedom Rapid Responses campaign Here to Report. My name is Hueting. I'm Senior Advocacy Officer for the European Centre for Press and Media Freedom. I'm very pleased to be joined by Tamara Filipovic, Secretary General of the Independent Journalists Association of Serbia, NUNS, and Jörg Reichel, Manager for the region Berlin-Brandenburg of the German Journalists Union ver.di. Welcome to both of you. We'll focus today on safety of journalists when they report on protests. Across the European Union and candidate countries, demonstrations are the context in which the Media Freedom Rapid Response most frequently documents media freedom violations and attacks on journalists. We will talk about the role of employers, the position of freelancers, and the importance of monitoring, and also how NUNS and ver.di engage on these issues. To start off the panel, let's have a closer look at the role of the police. On the one hand, we're seeing that they are responsible for a significant number of attacks and harassment. On the other, a frequently heard complaint is that police fail to protect journalists adequately. Tamara, what's the situation in Serbia in this regard? What are NUNS's key recommendations for the new government for improving the protection of journalists by the police? How do you engage with stakeholders on this, and is there a willingness from them to speak with the unions and with representatives of the community?
First of all, thank you for having me here. So the situation in Serbia, I would say, is quite complicated regarding this issue, because on the one hand, we have an institutional mechanism in which representatives of the police, prosecutor office, and journalist and media association sit together with an aim to improve the safety of journalists. And this mechanism has improved the speed and manner of reporting incidents and communication between journalists and media association on one side and relevant institutions on the other side. But there is still serious challenges and space to improve the safety of journalists. And our assessment is that in the initial stages, which include reporting and recording cases, the mechanism accelerated and it is good now. But in the later stages of the procedure, everything slows down, and very few cases actually ended in convictions. For example, in 2020 and 2021, prosecutor's office formed a total of 145 cases, but not just related to the protests. This is whole cases which was recording of the incidents which are against the journalists. But just a total of 11 decisions were made, 9 convictions and 2 opportunities. So we are sitting together in this mechanism, understanding the specificity and importance of journalistic work, those who are a part of this mechanism. But the problem is that this understanding is not still not on the level of the entire institution. So ES representative, for example, representatives, we are participate in the training organized by the Council of Europe for contact points for reporting attacks on journalists in the police. And the impression of our colleague is that we are far away from reaching a consensus between these two communities, the police and journalists, when it comes to their commitment to safeguard the public information and journalists. So this is supported also by the behavior of police officers in some cases during the protests, for example, in 2020, and also during the environmental protest which took place in late 2021. In 2020, journalists were the biggest victims of the violent protest, and 7 incidents against journalists were committed by the police, which is a real big problem. Of these incidents, in 5 cases, proceedings are still underway. Until now, none is completed. And in 2021, there were no physical clashes between police and journalists, but journalists were prevented from doing their job by police because they were accused by the police that they are organizers of the illegal protest because those protests were not those protests haven't a permission issued by the police for gathering the people at the street. So the police went to, in some cases, the police went to the homes of journalists and advised them that they should not report from the protest because in that case they are risking to have a criminal charge or misdemeanor. And many journalists received misdemeanor charges, some of which were withdrawn after the reaction of our and other journalist associations. And but however, to our knowledge, at least 7 charges are still pending and are before the misdemeanor courts. So in this regard, we can say that there is still some progress, if we wanted to be sarcastic, because now journalists are not beaten up by the police, but still the police last year just writing the misdemeanor charges. And what should be recommendations for improvement? We want to have a better treatment to the journalists as the victims. So assisting, it could be good to have assistance in reporting cases also by the police, informing about the course of a proceeding in which the journalists are victims, and to have a better communication between a journalist as a victim and the police. More efficient actions of the police in cases of attacks on journalists, and more efficient action when it comes to the orders of the prosecution office in those cases. Maybe we can organize some meetings with the police and journalists and the representatives of the association before some major events when it can be some violent protests are announced, or we can expect that the protest will be violent, in order for both parties to get acquainted with the rules of both professions. Also, greater openness of the police, not just over the journalists, but also to the general public, because they are our servants and they should serve to the whole society, and for better informing also to the whole society. So that is something which can be done, or which are our recommendations for now.
Thank you, Tamara, for setting the scene so clearly. Jörg, in Germany in the last year, we've seen some changes in police operating procedure. For example, in Berlin, with media protection zones being established by the police. Do you think this kind of protection measure is the answer, is a solution, and what else is needed?
That's a good question. Is that the answer? We think no. Because the solutions to the special solutions to prevent the worst violence against journalists on demonstrations. It's not to lift up press freedom on a higher level. That's only to protect against worst violence on demonstrations. In Germany, it's important, I think, as similar as what you told us, Tamara, it's to understand that the police is not only the protector, the police is also the attacker against journalists. And that means the police also physically attack journalists and obstruct press work. So according to Reporters Without Borders statistics, in 2021, 12 of 80 attacks were actually committed by police officers. So what did the police do to protect journalists? The police acknowledge the problems of attacks. That's really important that they say, okay, we have a problem, but they did it only in 4 of 16 states, and that's not enough. And what they did is they changed their tactics. And on demonstrations, we can find a little press protection area in a corner of the demonstration. We have something like a mobile police squad that accompany journalists in the background during press work. But we have this kind of police squads only not at every demonstration. We have to ask after this. And at third, we have the police raise the issue of press freedom, talks with those who resist the demonstration. They said, okay, we have press freedom. Please take care of your rally and have a look on this big subject. So first, what the police sometimes have done in the past is they did announcements over loudspeaker at the demonstration when journalists were attacked and said, okay, respect press freedom, slow down, and something like this. So, but that's not enough at the end of the day. What we needed is simple to apply and develop this kind of tactics in every state of Germany. And second, it's much more important is the training of police officers in press law. Mm-hmm. The police must know the role of journalists and the special right of journalists at demonstration. And the police must know the press cards. That's a big problem. So they didn't understand what is the special role from journalists around it and inside the demonstration. And third, we need legal changes. It's really important that the police ensuring freedom of the press at demonstration, not only to take care of the security and ensure the freedom of the assembly. Because the understanding of the police is we are here to protect the demonstration, but we are not at the demonstration to protect the journalists. And they have to change their mindset, and they have a narrow view on a demonstration and said, okay, we are only here to secure the demonstration, and the journalists in this mindset are the disruptors of the security of the event, of the demonstration. So it's a big step they have to go in the next time, that they understand that they are not the journalists at the demonstration is not a perpetrator. So we work together with other unions and associations and try to raise the issue of press freedom in politics, but it's a long way. So, and we have talks with police officers, and they said we need a lot of years to change the mindset inside of the police. So it's not a question of 1 or 2 years. I think we need 5 or 7 years to change it.
Yeah. You said a change of mind, a change of mindset in terms of recognizing responsibilities. Of course, the state isn't the only one who has a responsibility to protect and to improve the safety of journalists. Employers do as well. ver.di was one of the organizations that is behind the initiative of the Schutzkodex, a protection codex for media companies. Can you tell us more about this initiative and why is it needed?
We have this kind of protection code since April 2001, and it's a self-commitment of the media companies. And this self-commitment means that a media company commit to standards to protect their journalists. Practical, it means they have a contact person for hate mail, for hate speech. They have something like a psychological. They're blocking users on social media. They have a point of contact for threats and attacks. And they have something like a social media watch, assumption of costs, education and security. And it's a match of a lot of simple, it's a mosaic of a lot of measures. And at the end of the day, it's a higher level of security and especially legal support and support of security when you go to demonstrations or high dangerous grounds. But it's at the end of the day, it's we have not a law for the companies that they have to sign this. They're doing it voluntarily. So we have a lot of companies, big media companies, under this umbrella, more or less. We have Taz, we have Funke, Zeit Online, Die Zeit, Süddeutsche Zeitung, big newspapers, and Stuttgarter Zeitung, and smaller newspapers, but that's not enough. So we can see that several newspapers are not really sure if they want to sign it or not. But after 1 year, we can say we have a lot of media houses on board, and we think it will be more 2022.
Tamara, do you think that more engagement, more commitment by media companies, media owners, is it needed also in Serbia? What do you think would be the obstacles to realizing a project like this?
I think it is more than needed, and also during the past years, for example, very much it was the burden was put on the journalist association mostly, and we try to bear that responsibility on our shoulders. But for example, if we are going talking about the violent protests or demonstrations, that is something which is not doing. It's not happening every day, and I think in those cases, the newsrooms and employers have to be accountable also for the safety of their journalists, because the journalists are not at the street and on the protest because they are regular citizens and they want to be there. They are there because of their job. To my knowledge, I think that in Serbia there is no media outlets who had some kind of protocols how their journalists should protect themselves and how to react in the circumstances like the violent protests are. What we did, for example, in 2020, those protests, all of us, we were unprepared because it was in the middle of the pandemic and nobody expected that it will be so violent. But we mobilized ourselves, we as a journalist associations and also the newsroom. And after the second day, we, for example, procured pressed vests for the journalists, for some employers procured gas masks. We organized as an association Zoom training, how to report, how to behave in the urban hostile environment. But I think it's not enough. Some kind of protocols should be adopted within the newsrooms, and I think it is something which will make journalists more safe, that somebody who are their employer thinking about their protection. And this responsibility have to be separated. On one side, there is institutions. On the other side, there is three parts of the responsibility. As I said, institutions, journalist association, and also the employers and newsrooms.
Yeah. Now, of course, building that resilience through the newsrooms will exclude a category, or not exclude by purpose, but a consequence would be the exclusion of a category of journalists and photographers, press photographers, who are specifically vulnerable to attacks during protests, namely freelancers. Tamara, what's being done in Serbia and what is needed in your context to improve their protection?
Freelance journalists must not be left to defend by themselves. We as an association should take part of the responsibility for their safety. As I said previous, we organize the trainings, we distribute press vests, our lawyers are available to all journalists and also the freelance journalists for advice or reports of the incidents, not only during the protest and demonstration, but also in the regular conditions. So, however, I'm not sure if we can provide them with some greater protection on the ground. For example, I know that some newsrooms during the violent protest in 2020, they provide the security, additional security staff for their people at the ground. But I am not sure that that is a good way, because if we do something like that, I think it seems like a bit of guerrilla action, and in that situation we are I don't know, annul the responsibility of the institutions, and I think it's something which we should not do, because if some individuals taking over the role of the institution, it will not be good for the society. So yes, I think that freelance journalists should have the whole support from the journalist association, because they do not have their newsrooms and employers who can bear also the responsibility in the part which is not related to the institutional answer on this problem.
Yeah. Jörg, same question for you, but for Germany, what can be done to protect freelancers better?
So it's a bit difficult. The most important thing is that they have something like a network around their professional work. For us as a union, we say, okay, come in our union and be a member in our union, and we support you. So that, I think, we have money, we have support structures, so we can help you if you have something like an health accident at a demonstration or technical problems, damaged camera, something else like this. We can support you with our money or look at other money in other organizations. So that first, what we are doing, if we have a member or a non-member, we try to organize for their help too. So because it's solidarity, and but there is money in the helping structure for freelancers, but it's the freelancers at the end of the day have less structures around them, especially security structures. And they decided most of the time we don't need the security, and my damaged camera is not so damaged enough. And we offer them structure, but sometimes they said, okay, I don't need a security, and because I want to be a little bit invisible, or I don't want to have 2 bodyguards around me, so it's better for working, not to work in big groups. So, but freelancers are the biggest victim in the last 2 years, especially the Corona crisis, and with the security problems on our demonstrations.
Yeah, thank you for that. Lot of food for thought. Thanks a lot to both you, Tamara, and you, Jörg, for sharing your views, insights, and expertise with us.
And thank you for watching us. You may report press and media freedom violations on mappingmediafreedom.org and find more information on MFRR support offerings covering practical support, legal support, training sessions, and residency programs, mfrr.eu. And please follow us on Twitter. Thank you for watching us.